of rattlesnakes, murderers, and chaos. The first time I remember being taught how to catch and play with live rattlesnakes, I was 6 or 7 years old at the time. We were living in the mountains in central California, up outside of Potter Valley. Rattlesnakes were prevalent in the area, and in fact, a den of them was really close to our camp. For that reason, we had logs lashed into the trees for our sleeping areas, as we frequently had them show up in and around our camp. At this time, it was my mother, stepfather, brother, sister, and myself. We also added the second of my 3 sisters that same summer. The story of my sister's birth is entertaining in and of itself. We didn't have transportation at the time, so when my mom went into labor, she had to hike out to the dirt road and ended up flagging down a dump truck. The cab was full, but they did allow her to climb into the back of the truck, and they drove down the mountain with her bouncing around the back of the truck. They drove right up to the emergency room of the hospital where she climbed out of the bed of the dump truck, walked inside, and gave birth. That must have been quite the sight, having a woman in labor climbing out the back of a dump truck at the hospital entrance. There are many memories of my childhood that I don't remember actively. When something triggers them, it can be quite a flood between the memories and the emotions. However, this period in my life with many clear and fond memories. My parents had some hippie friends with a house up in the mountains, and we settled down the road from them. Well, down the road, across a field, and on the other side of a stream. And the term house is a little overstated as well. It was more of a homestead that lacked power, running water, indoor plumbing, and the normal stuff we associate with that word. Despite all that, it was a pretty nice setup. At this age, a kid couldn't have a more exciting excursion. I mean, we were basically living in tree forts. My brother and I spent our days chasing alligator lizards. Afternoons were best for that when they came out to bask on the rocks to warm their bodies. We would attempt to catch garter snakes in the field, but we had to move really fast to do that. Once a week, we head over to the homestead house to bathe. There was a giant steel tub in the yard on a platform. It was filled from a nearby spring, and a bunch of wood was piled underneath of it to light a fire. It would take hours to heat the tub, as it was quite large. Again, great fun times as a kid, sitting in a giant wood-fired hot tub in the mountains. While the fire was burning, we were tasked with digging up soap root to use for bathing. Honestly, I don't think the soap root did much from my memory. Must have been one of those hippie things. During the evenings, we created a fun game of catching the dragonflies that flew around the stream by our camp. Once my brother, myself, and my stepdad, Hal, had dragonflies, we'd tie playing cards to each dragonfly. Then we would release them and see who would win by having the dragonfly that would fly the farthest. I guess this could be considered animal abuse of some sort in retrospect. I don't, however, ever remember hurting the dragonflies, so I'll just have to leave that up to you to be the judge of that. As a young kid, it was definitely fun and a good way to kill time when there wasn't much else to do besides explore. Our stepdad ended up finding a drinking buddy up in the mountains. A mile or so deeper into the mountains, another person had been living for quite some time, it appears. Dad would go up every few days, and the two of them would drink beers and tell stories. At first, we would all tag along and listen to the stories they told each other over the campfire. After a few visits, however, Mom told us that we would be all staying at camp except for Dad on those trips. Oh yeah, the rattlesnakes. There were quite a lot of them. Dad kept catching and killing them on nearly a daily basis. He had a big board with the skins tacked onto it as he planned on making stuff out of them to sell. We also ate rattlesnake meat as often as he would tell us how it was a delicacy at some restaurants and we should be lucky to have it. I never was impressed with the taste of it myself. It was meat, however, which I did enjoy, especially over the normal course of rice and beans by the 50-pound bag. There was one day that my mom was sitting in camp, breastfeeding my little sis, the one that had just been born, when Dad got a strange look and tone to him, and he said to Mom, "Don't make a move. Remain as calm as you can." Then he slowly grabbed his long stick with a small Y at the end and maneuvered himself close to her. In the bush directly behind her was a rattlesnake sitting in the coiled-up position, facing my mom's back, ready to strike. The Y stick is what he used to pin the head of the snake to the ground. Once the head of the snake is pinned, you can either pick it up, if you know how to, or simply cut off the head right away, which is what we did in that case. After that instance, he began teaching me about how to work with rattlesnakes, telling me about the distance they could strike while in the coiled position, which was much farther than what it looked like. He taught me where they hid, how they acted and responded, and most importantly, I learned how to avoid or kill them. I practiced making rattlesnake catching sticks with a Y at the end to pin their neck to the ground. I learned about not ever eating rattlesnakes that had been out of sight. Once cornered, the snake may bite itself to poison their own flesh with their venom. And their venom is no joke. And yes, at 6 years old, I was taught to catch and play with live rattlesnakes. Once captured, I would hold the snake right behind the head as it would wrap its body around my forearm. Feeling that cold body wrap and slither around on my skin was a weird feeling. But I knew I couldn't get distracted, as the slightest mistake would lead to the death from this strange creature. Then I would have to hold the head to the ground and make sure it was behind the venom sacs before cutting the body off. Cutting in the wrong spot would contaminate the meat with the venom. I loved all the details, the steps, and the precautions that had to be taken. The thrill, excitement, and the tingly feeling that ran through my body along with a mixture of fear was something I'll admit to liking as well. The feeling from holding something in my hands that could quickly kill me, but also confidence I had in my safety if I did everything I was supposed to, was quite rewarding. In retrospect, it's instances like these that have likely played a big role in who I am. I have often wondered how the nerd with dirty clothes and no friends and low self-esteem, who literally lived in a trailer down by the river, developed an astounding level of self-confidence. The belief that I could accomplish anything I set my mind to if I just put a plan in place and displayed the courage and work ethic to follow it through. At the same time, I've been plagued my entire life with pushing my limits, risky behavior, and never settling. I chase danger, and if I'm not living in some sort of chaos, I will find it, or I will move on. It's not something I generally talk about, as the stories are not those you share publicly, but those close to me at any point in my life can attest to it. With these traits and behaviors, I'm simply lucky to be alive today. As I've gotten older and grown a family, I have more to live for. So behaviors, they do change, well, at least temper. At the same time, it's those same traits that brought me from absolutely nothing to performing at a world-class level as a corporate executive, lifting, and even with my hobbies. As a side note, my off-roading, I've been, on Spike TV and multiple magazines with the suspension and steering design work I do. And now, success as an entrepreneur. That deadly snake on my wrist taught me that if I knew the steps to be taken, was confident and controlled, that despite fear and risk, I was in control of my destiny. Apparently, there was one more deadly snake in the grass to be dealt with that I wasn't aware of. One day we had a ride arranged to spend the day in town. My mom did some shopping, and we hung around the parking lot by the store for some time. Just killing time. My brother and I had fun picking cherries from a tree and eating those for hours. That evening, when we returned to camp, I was told that the police had come and taken away my dad's drinking buddy. After some prodding, I found out that he was a bad person and had apparently been hiding out in the woods for years, avoiding jail for murder. He had tied a man to a tree, beaten him to death with a tire iron, over something like $20. I never did ask how the police had found him. Why, we had just happened to be in town that day, all day long, and how my parents seemed to know the details of why they had come for him. I just knew, without asking, that this info must have slipped from him in one of those drunken conversations, and probably why we didn't go back with Dad on those drinking nights around the fire. And just like those other snakes in the field, there was nothing to fear. The snake was kept close until it could be controlled and the risk eliminated. It's not uncommon for me to hear someone say about myself, "You're the most driven person I've ever met." And I don't know if that's really the case, however. I'm turning 40 in a month, and I still wonder if I'm really just that 6-year-old kid squeezing the sides of the rattlesnake face to open its mouth so I can peer down its throat, see the size of those venomous fangs and watch its tongue flicker at the air, feeling the cold scales in the underbelly move strangely over my arm. All those tactile feelings mixed together with emotions of both fear and control. Is it driven? Or do I just enjoy that experience, enjoy playing with that snake, and have yet to be bit?